Let me start with something that still boggles my mind. My mother managed to squander millions of dollars and now genuinely expects me to bail her out. Here's how it all unfolded. My mom, Elaine, spent most of her life as someone who never needed to worry about finances. Coming from an affluent family, she was accustomed to luxury from birth. When her first marriage to my father, a humble mechanic named John, ended, she quickly married Richard, a wealthy architect from New York City. My older sister, Emily, and I, born from her first marriage, suddenly found ourselves in a completely different world. We went from a small suburban home to a penthouse overlooking Central Park. Emily and I were kids, amazed yet overwhelmed by the sudden shift in lifestyle. Our mom quickly adjusted to being a socialite, shopping sprees in Fifth Avenue boutiques, lavish parties every weekend, frequent travels abroad. It seemed there was nothing out of reach for her. While Emily and I grew up sharing rooms and toys, Mom spent fortunes on designer outfits, cosmetic, surgeries, and anything else that allowed her to keep up appearances. Richard adored her and provided for every extravagant whim without question. I can't recall a single moment where Mom had to deny herself anything. Vacations in Europe, a personal trainer flown in from Los Angeles twice a month, and even a chef who specialized in vegan cuisine. The spending was endless. Tragedy struck twice, and with each misfortune, Mom profited immensely. First, Grandpa passed away, leaving her a substantial inheritance. Just 2 years later, my grandmother tragically died in an accident, resulting in a massive insurance payout. Altogether, Mom came into more money than most people see in multiple lifetimes, easily into the millions. Yet the concept of moderation or financial responsibility never entered her vocabulary. Emily and I, meanwhile, learned early on to fend for ourselves. Mom never gave us financial help unless our lives were literally falling apart, and even then, it was with heavy sighs and guilt-inducing comments. The irony never escaped me. She lectured us about money while spending recklessly herself. Life taught me to be resourceful and independent. After high school, I skipped college to enlist in the Air Force. Serving taught me discipline, hard work, and careful planning. Following my military service, I enrolled in night classes, earning a degree in accounting while raising my daughter, Sarah, alone. I swore to myself that she would never experience the instability I did. Then, a few years ago, life delivered an unexpected surprise. My biological father, John, the simple, hard-working man Mom had abandoned, revealed that he had secretly saved money his entire life. Lying in hospice after a tough battle with cancer, he quietly told me he was leaving everything he had to me. My heart stopped when I realized it amounted to 7 figures. This inheritance changed everything for Sarah and me. For the first time, I could truly provide security and comfort, planning our lives without the anxiety that had defined my youth. I worked meticulously with a financial advisor, ensuring every dollar was managed wisely, understanding the value of security more than ever. You can probably guess what happened next. Mom, now 72, had managed to blow through her entire fortune. All those extravagant purchases, luxury trips, and impulsive decisions finally caught up to her. Recently she called me, not to catch up, but to ask if I could buy her a new condo, claiming she couldn't possibly live without a certain standard of comfort. At first, I thought it was a tasteless joke. But no, she was dead serious. To make matters worse, even as she begged me for help, her wasteful habits continued. Just last week, she proudly mentioned hiring a cleaning woman who drove 4 hours to clean and organize her apartment for $600 a visit, because local cleaners just didn't meet her standards. Refusing her request was not difficult. After all, she had spent decades making clear that Emily and I were on our own, but I knew my refusal would ignite a firestorm of guilt trips, emotional manipulation, and passive-aggressive jabs aimed directly at my conscience. Mom was used to getting her way, and she wouldn't take kindly to rejection. Now I sit here contemplating the inevitable fallout. Protecting my future, and Sarah's, is paramount, but bracing myself for what's coming is another matter entirely. The storm arrived quicker than I anticipated. Mom called incessantly, each conversation escalating into more desperate pleas, punctuated by accusations that I was cold-hearted and selfish. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd never lifted a finger to help her children financially now saw herself as entitled to the money my dad had painstakingly saved and left specifically for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to help. Deep down, of course, I wished things could have been different, but my mom wasn't someone you could just help once. Giving her money would be like tossing cash into a black hole. Never enough, always demanding more. She refused to acknowledge her reckless spending habits or make any adjustments. Her life was still a carousel of expensive dinners, overpriced shopping sprees, and constant redecorating. My phone rang endlessly, voicemail after voicemail filled with melodramatic messages about abandonment and poverty. Poverty, this from a woman who'd never known a day without luxury. She would tell me that her friends were shocked at my behavior, painting herself as a martyr whose own daughter had cast her aside. I knew better than to believe everything she said, but the guilt was overwhelming nonetheless. The hardest part was explaining this situation to Sarah, now 16 and perceptive beyond her years. She had always admired her grandmother from afar, dazzled by Beverly's sophistication and seemingly effortless glamour. Sarah didn't understand the complexities of adult relationships yet. To her, it was simple. Family helps family. The conversations we had left me exhausted and riddled with self-doubt. "Why can't we just help Grandma, Mom?" she'd asked innocently one night. I struggled to answer without tainting her young perception of family. How do you tell your child the bitter truth, that some people will take everything you give and still demand more? Each encounter with Mom began to chip away at my resolve. She knew exactly how to twist the knife, mentioning her deteriorating health, her dwindling friendships, and even subtly hinting at changing her will to exclude me entirely. Not that there was anything left to inherit, but the gesture itself felt profoundly manipulative. To find clarity, I sought advice from my sister, Emily. Unlike me, she distanced herself early, relocating to Colorado years ago to run a small, thriving coffee shop. When I called her explaining the latest developments, Emily laughed bitterly and said, "Mom's always been like this. She won't stop until she gets what she wants or destroys what she can't have." That conversation opened my eyes. Emily's words resonated deeply, reminding me of countless moments from our childhood that I'd suppressed. Holidays when Mom forgot gifts, birthdays missed because her social calendar was too busy, and her total disregard for our emotional well-being. My sister was right. Mom had never changed. Still, saying no was harder than I ever imagined. Each call, each tearful plea from Beverly chipped away at my resolve. It became clear I needed boundaries stronger than silence. So I confronted her, clearly and calmly, over a tense lunch at her favorite bistro. "Mom, I can't keep funding your lifestyle," I said firmly, hoping my voice didn't betray the anxiety bubbling inside me. "You owe me this," she snapped back, eyes narrowing coldly. "I raised you, sacrificed everything for you." I bit back a bitter laugh. "You sacrificed nothing. Dad worked his fingers to the bone. Richard spoiled you rotten. You never went without. But Emily and I certainly did." Her face turned red, the anger quickly surfacing. "I gave you everything," she hissed. "Except love," I replied calmly. The words hung heavily between us. She stormed off, slamming the cafe door behind her. Sitting alone at that table, sipping now cold coffee, I realized the truth. This wasn't about money. This was about control. Beverly needed power, dominance, a way to manipulate everyone around her, and money had always been her weapon of choice. Driving home, my mind raced. I knew the next few weeks would be brutal, but clarity began to emerge. This was my moment to break free, not just for myself, but for Sarah. To ensure that history wouldn't repeat itself, I had to remain strong. But as the evening fell and I reached my driveway, my heart sank. Beverly's sleek silver Mercedes was parked outside my house. She was waiting for me, and confrontation was unavoidable now. My stomach dropped seeing Mom's luxury SUV parked in my driveway. She stepped out, dressed impeccably as always, sunglasses hiding the sharp glare I knew all too well. Taking a deep breath, I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. "I'm glad you're home," she said curtly, her tone clipped and precise. "We need to talk, Vanessa." We moved inside. Sarah, sensing tension, quickly retreated to her room, earbuds in. I silently thanked her teenage instincts. Mom surveyed my modest living room, a hint of disdain flickering in her eyes. "I see you haven't used your father's money to upgrade," she said coldly, brushing imaginary dust off the couch before sitting down. "I prefer financial security over vanity," I retorted, immediately regretting the bite in my voice. She leaned back, folding her hands calmly, but I saw the rage simmering beneath the surface. "Financial security is exactly what I need right now, Abigail. You don't understand the stress I'm under. How could you abandon your mother?" The accusation stung, but I held firm. "Mom, you spent millions, literally. Where did it all go? If you expect any help from me, you owe me honesty." She hesitated, clearly unprepared for direct confrontation. Finally, her shoulders sagged, and she let out a heavy sigh. Fine. You want the truth? She launched into her confession, though each revelation felt like a calculated performance. Beverly admitted she'd gambled heavily in private casinos, hidden behind the facade of endless shopping trips and extravagant vacations. It wasn't just clothes or spa treatments. She'd also financed failed business ventures for her high society friends, lent money to acquaintances who vanished at the first mention of repayment, and chased high-risk investments recommended by flashy acquaintances. I thought the money would last forever, she confessed bitterly, but one mistake led to another. Before I knew it, the money was just gone. My disbelief turned to anger, then sadness. The woman I'd seen as selfish and careless had become a tragic figure, blinded by ego, pride, and a desperate craving for validation. But it didn't change reality. Her reckless choices weren't my responsibility. Mom, I spoke carefully, trying to soften the blow. You never trusted Emily or me with anything. Why should we trust you now? She looked genuinely shocked. Trust? I'm your mother. Does family mean nothing anymore? Her words twisted sharply inside me, reviving a lifetime of resentment. Family? You only invoke family when it serves you, Mom. Remember when I lost my job and almost lost the house? You lent me $200 with a lecture, then turned around and spent $2,000 on a handbag. That's different, she argued weakly, though her voice wavered slightly. How? Because you're the one in trouble now. My voice rose, emotions bubbling uncontrollably. Do you know how many times Emily and I wished you'd just act like a mother, instead of someone embarrassed by her own children? She stared silently, jaw clenched. For the first time, Beverly seemed to see the reality behind my anger. But her pride refused to allow an apology. I did my best, she finally muttered. I raised two strong, independent women. You didn't raise us, I snapped, my voice cracking with years of suppressed hurt. We survived despite you. We sat quietly, the ticking clock amplifying our silence. It was clear this wasn't going anywhere constructive. She stood, abruptly straightening her blouse. If you're so determined to abandon me, fine. I won't beg, but don't expect me to forget your cruelty. Watching her drive away, my heart felt hollow. Despite everything, a small, childish part of me still longed for her approval. Yet I knew giving in meant losing my chance to finally build something secure, stable, and lasting for Sarah. Days passed, and the tension didn't subside, but clarity sharpened with each passing day. Conversations with Emily helped confirm my resolve. She encouraged me not to waver, sharing her own painful memories of our mother's neglectful extravagance. Emily had learned long ago that cutting Mom off emotionally was necessary for survival, a lesson I was only now fully understanding. Still, guilt gnawed at me. It was a battle between emotional duty and logical responsibility. Each time my phone vibrated, anxiety twisted my stomach, fearing another manipulative message. The pressure was becoming unbearable, but clarity finally arrived one rainy evening as Sarah sat quietly coloring at the kitchen table. Mom, she asked softly, will Grandma ever forgive you? I smiled sadly. Maybe someday, sweetheart, but forgiving myself is more important. Right now, the phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Mom, it was Richard, her ex-husband. Surprised, I answered quickly. Listen carefully, he began, his voice tense. There's something about your mother that you don't know. Something I should have told you a long time ago. My heart stopped. The saga wasn't over yet, it was only beginning. Richard's voice trembled slightly over the phone, uncharacteristic for a man I'd always seen as calm and controlled. Meet me tomorrow morning, he urged. This is something you need to hear face to face. Sleep eluded me that night. Every horrible scenario played out in my mind. Was Mom involved in something criminal? Had she somehow been defrauding people for money? The possibilities were endless, each more unsettling than the last. By sunrise, anxiety had settled deep in my chest. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe near Richard's office in downtown Manhattan. When I arrived, I found him sitting quietly in a corner booth, stirring a cup of coffee he clearly hadn't touched. For a man who had always appeared strong and confident, he now looked weary and burdened. You look tired, Richard noted gently as I sat across from him. Didn't sleep much, I confessed, gripping my coffee tightly. What's going on, Richard? What's this secret about Mom? He sighed, glancing around cautiously before leaning forward. Your mother. Beverly wasn't always this way. When we first married, she was different, still demanding, yes, but nothing like this. Then what changed? I pressed impatiently. It was after her parents died. That money, it wasn't just inheritance and insurance payouts. He paused, hesitant. There was another source, something nobody knew about. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? Richard hesitated again, clearly struggling. Your grandmother's accident wasn't exactly random. Investigators found suspicious circumstances, but it was quickly hushed. Your mother got the payout and never looked back. Cold dread filled my chest. Are you suggesting my mother was involved? Richard shook his head quickly. I don't think she orchestrated it, but someone did. Someone who might have been close to her. Beverly suddenly had more money than she'd ever imagined, and she made sure no one questioned it. The revelation left me speechless. Could Mom really have known? Could she have overlooked something so awful because it filled her bank account? My mother was manipulative, extravagant, selfish, but this was something far darker. Richard read the disbelief in my eyes. I confronted her years later after we divorced. She didn't deny it, she just shrugged it off, as if nothing mattered more than the money. I felt sick, but there was nothing concrete I could do. I sat back, stunned. Why didn't you say something sooner? He sighed heavily. Because selfishly, I didn't want it coming back on me. My reputation, my career, everything. And honestly, I hoped it wasn't true. But now, seeing what she's capable of, watching how she's treating you, it felt wrong to stay silent. We sat quietly, absorbing the weight of the revelation. Questions spiraled through my mind. Did Emily know? Did Dad ever suspect? Was I obligated to confront Beverly directly? After a long silence, I finally found my voice. What should I do? Richard reached out and squeezed my hand reassuringly. That's up to you, but at least you understand the kind of person you're dealing with. Beverly has always been ruthless when it comes to money. Protect yourself and Sarah. Driving home. Later, the world felt altered. Darker somehow. Every interaction with Mom now carried hidden implications. Her greed, her manipulations, it was all suddenly cast in a sinister light. I spent the evening pacing, debating what to do next. Telling Emily felt inevitable, but I dreaded shattering her peace, and confronting Mom directly? The thought was nauseating, yet keeping silent was equally unbearable. That night, as Sarah slept peacefully upstairs, I realized the burden of truth was mine alone. I couldn't unhear Richard's words. I couldn't pretend ignorance anymore. Yet confronting Mom would mean unleashing a storm unlike anything I'd faced, but avoiding it seemed equally impossible. Finally, I decided. If I was ever going to break free from Beverly's control, I needed answers directly from her. Tomorrow, I'd confront her again, this time armed with the truth. Just as I began to relax into that decision, my phone buzzed sharply. A new message from Mom. I know Richard talked to you. Before you do anything rash, remember, some truths destroy more than they heal. Think carefully. My heart raced. How did she know? Had Richard betrayed me, or was Mom's network of manipulation even deeper than I'd imagined? One thing was clear, the battle for my freedom had only just begun. The drive to Mom's new rental house, a far cry from her old mansion, was surreal. Anxiety churned within me, my heart pounding like a relentless drumbeat, echoing in my ears as I approached. The neighborhood was modest, an alien world compared to Beverly's usual haunts. She must have despised every minute here, I thought bitterly. Yet this was her reality now. Parking in front, I braced myself. The house looked ordinary, nothing special. Yet I knew behind that door lay the remnants of Beverly's collapsed empire, and her stubborn pride, wounded but defiant. Knocking on the door, I felt a strange chill, as if the past hovered just behind me, whispering warnings I couldn't quite understand. The door opened slowly, revealing my mother in a simple sweater. Her eyes tired yet sharp. No designer dresses, no expensive perfume. Just a fragile woman wearing her last armor of dignity. You've come back, she remarked softly, stepping aside to let me enter. Inside, it was obvious she downsized dramatically. Minimalist furniture replaced her usual opulence. Even her prized artworks were absent. For the first time, Beverly looked vulnerable, something I'd never expected to witness. Let's sit, she said quietly, motioning to a modest table. We faced each other warily, like two opponents preparing for a final showdown. The air hung heavy with tension. I spoke with Richard, I began, my voice steady but cautious. I know. About Grandma's accident. Is it true, Mom? Did you profit from something so horrible? Beverly sighed deeply, her expression defeated. I didn't cause the accident, if that's what you're asking. But yes, I knew the truth. And I let it go. Disgust twisted inside me. How could you? Her eyes hardened instantly. Don't judge me so quickly, Allison. I was young, overwhelmed, scared. Your father had abandoned us. Richard's money was my only security. If the investigation had continued, it could have ruined everything. Anger. Urged. You traded your soul for comfort and status. You chose money over your own mother's memory. She flinched but refused to look away. Maybe I did, but life isn't black and white. I made choices, difficult ones. You've never had to decide between survival and morality. You weren't surviving, Mom, I shot back sharply. You were indulging, and you're still doing it now, demanding that I bail you out after everything. Her pride flared again, but then unexpectedly her expression softened. You're right. I've always chosen comfort over love, maybe because comfort felt safer than connection. Her sudden honesty caught me off guard. My throat tightened, emotions flooding through me. You had 2 daughters who needed you. We just wanted a mother, not the money, not the luxury, just you. Beverly's facade cracked, tears forming quietly. I thought giving you stability, wealth was enough. Clearly, I was wrong. The raw honesty stunned me. Was this genuine remorse or another manipulation? I hesitated, unsure what to believe. But deep down, I saw something I hadn't before. Loneliness, regret, a woman finally seeing the wreckage she'd left behind. Still, caution held firm. I can't save you, Mom, not financially. If I do, it never ends. I understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible. But could you ever forgive me? Could we start over? Not financially, but as family? The question shattered me. Decades of hurt, abandonment, resentment swirled chaotically inside. Could I truly forgive? Knowing her history, her flaws, her ruthlessness. Was forgiveness even deserved? Yet another voice whispered softly, persistent. Could I forgive myself if I didn't? At least try? We sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Moments stretched endlessly, until finally I broke the quiet. Maybe someday, I said gently. I don't know if I can forget everything, but maybe we can move forward somehow. A small smile flickered across Beverly's lips, uncertain but genuine. That's more than I deserve. Walking away from that modest house, my emotions felt tangled, yet strangely lighter. Confronting Mom had revealed truths about both of us, flawed, complicated, struggling humans caught in webs of choices, regrets, and hopes. Back home, I hugged Sarah tighter than ever, determined to break the cycle of emotional neglect. My mother's choices had defined my past, but they wouldn't control our future. Later, as I prepared dinner, a text notification pinged softly. It was Richard again, brief but urgent. Be careful. Your mother hasn't told you everything yet. My stomach tightened again, dread returning. Another secret? Another betrayal? Just when I'd begun to see hope, darkness returned, sharper and more threatening. The worst wasn't over, not even close. Richard's message gnawed at my mind relentlessly. Just when I'd glimpsed a possible path forward with Mom, doubt flooded back stronger than ever. What else could Beverly possibly be hiding? Despite my instincts screaming to leave it alone, I knew I couldn't. 2 restless days passed before I finally confronted her again, this time at her home. When she opened the door, she seemed startled, clearly not expecting me so soon. What's wrong? She asked nervously, her eyes searching mine for clues. Richard messaged me again, I stated firmly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He said there's more you haven't told me. No more secrets, Mom. Not if you ever want to rebuild our relationship. She sat down heavily, looking older, exhausted, defeated. After a long pause, Beverly met my gaze and finally spoke. I wasn't completely honest about your grandmother's accident, she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. The insurance investigation. It wasn't just suspicious. It was deliberately buried. Not by me directly, but by someone I trusted deeply. Who? I demanded, my heart racing painfully in my chest. She closed her eyes, swallowing hard. Richard himself. Shock froze me in place, disbelief echoing through every fiber of my being. Richard? Why? Money, she admitted bitterly. Richard's business was in trouble. He needed capital urgently, and your grandmother's passing meant instant cash flow for us. He assured me nothing could be traced back, that the accident would seem entirely natural. My mind spun, desperately trying to piece everything together. Richard, the seemingly stable, principled figure in my life, had been the architect behind such a dark betrayal. And you agreed? My voice trembled, torn between disgust and disbelief. At first I resisted, Beverly confessed, eyes glistening, with shameful tears. But I was terrified of losing everything. Richard convinced me we could rebuild our lives with the money. I was weak, Abigail. I agreed to remain silent, and silence became complicity. Betrayal crushed me, twisting my insides painfully. All these years you let Emily and me believe you were entirely responsible. You shielded Richard? She nodded painfully. I thought I loved him. Even after we divorced, exposing him would have dragged me down too. But now, seeing how he's playing you, I can't let it continue. He wants control over you, your inheritance, everything. The depth of manipulation overwhelmed me. Richard hadn't reached out to help me. He'd wanted leverage. Mom had been a pawn, but so had I. Beverly reached out, touching my hand gently. I know you owe me nothing, Abigail, but please don't trust him. I stared silently, struggling to process the waves of betrayal and deception. The woman who'd spent decades hurting me now pleaded sincerely, her warning unmistakably genuine. My entire narrative of blame and innocence had shattered into pieces. Leaving Beverly's house, I felt numb. The villain had changed faces. The person I trusted most had become the ultimate betrayer. At home, I paced endlessly, unable to rest, replaying every conversation with Richard. His careful words, his reassuring smiles, everything had been calculated. Manipulation. My phone rang suddenly, Richard's name glowing ominously. For a moment, panic gripped me. Gathering courage, I answered calmly. Abigail, his voice warm, deceptively kind. Have you spoken with your mother again? Yes, I replied coolly, steadying my breath. She told me everything. He paused sharply, silence heavy with tension. Finally, his tone shifted, darker now. I see, you understand there's more at stake here than just feelings, don't you? Yes, I shot back sharply. The truth. Careful, Abigail, he warned, voice icy. Accidents happen easily, especially when family ties fray. Think carefully about your next steps. The threat sent chills down my spine. This wasn't mere manipulation. It was outright danger. Ending the call, I knew my only option now was transparency. Within hours, Emily knew everything. Stunned yet unwaveringly supportive. Together, we moved decisively, contacting trusted lawyers and authorities discreetly, determined to finally bring closure to our family's twisted saga. Months later, Richard faced charges for conspiracy and fraud. Beverly cooperated fully, accepting responsibility while exposing every hidden detail. Our mother-daughter bond slowly healed, fragile but sincere, rebuilt on honesty at last. Incredibly out of darkness came clarity. My journey revealed not just ugly truths, but strength, resilience, and a powerful lesson about trust. The inheritance from Dad safeguarded Sarah's future, untouched by the chaos of manipulation. Life taught me harshly, yet wisely. True wealth isn't money. It's clarity, integrity, and courage in facing the truth, no matter how painful. And in the end, freedom was sweeter than anything Beverly's millions could ever buy. That's the end of today's story. Did things turn out the way you thought, or were there some surprises along the way? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you haven't joined the community yet, now's the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to catch new stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.